Dead men don't talk. It was something that old man Jenkins had always said, especially when he didn't want to talk about a certain topic. The old man would look at anyone who asked him a question about his past and say, "Dead men don't talk." He also added that they don't answer questions either. Dead men don't talk. When George arrived at Jenkins's house for dinner, he was ready to ask some very important questions. His biological grandfather had passed away unexpectedly last week, leaving behind many unanswered questions. All of them revolved around one thing. What happened to his parents? Why did Jenkins raise George instead of his own son? And where were his parents buried? George had been adopted by Jenkins as a baby, but he knew nothing about his biological parents or why he was given up for adoption. All he knew was their names. His mother was Maria Hernandez and his father was John Smith, but that didn't help him much. There were millions of people with those names in the United States alone. Jenkins opened the door when George knocked. He was a tall, thin man with white hair and piercing blue eyes. He looked very healthy for 73 years old. Come in, he said, leading George into the house. It'll be 15 minutes before dinner's ready. Sit down and relax. George sat down, but he didn't relax. He looked around the room, trying to find something to talk about. "You know," he finally said, "I haven't been here since I was 12. I don't recognize this place. You've changed it quite a bit." Jenkins nodded. "Yeah, it looks different because I fixed it up since you were here. Your grandma isn't alive to do it anymore. She loved decorating for the holidays, but I can still do it. I put up all these lights because she liked them." George nodded slowly. He wondered if his mother had decorated for the holidays. He remembered celebrating Christmas at Jenkins's house every year, but he never celebrated Christmas with his mom. He didn't even remember her. He only had a handful of vague memories from his early childhood. Most of them didn't even include her. Just one memory stood out in his mind. He was maybe 4 years old and standing next to a woman who looked exactly like him, except she was shorter. They were looking at Christmas lights together. George reached for a light that was strung up high on a house and touched it accidentally. He recoiled immediately. "Don't touch the lights, Georgie," the woman said, and then she reached up and turned off the faulty bulb. George thought back to that moment often, wondering who the woman was. He felt connected to her somehow, like he could feel her presence in his dreams. Sometimes he dreamed that she was reaching out for him, trying to tell him something, but he never woke up. When she was close enough to touch him, he woke up. He had told Jenkins about these dreams, but the old man just shook his head and said, "Dead men don't talk." George sighed and pushed away from the table. "I'm going for a walk," he told Jenkins. "This food is great, but I ate too much for lunch, and I don't want to sit inside." "Suit yourself," Jenkins replied, but George noticed his shoulders slump slightly. George decided not to push him. Instead, he went outside and walked down the sidewalk. The night air was cold and damp, and it made him shiver. He missed the woman in his dream. He wanted to talk to her, but he didn't know how. Maybe if he kept dreaming about her, he would eventually get the chance to speak to her. Maybe if he kept searching for his parents' graves, he would eventually find them and they would tell him why they gave him up. Back at the house, George tried to eat more of Jenkins's famous apple pie, but the taste was terrible. It wasn't sweet like it usually was. George pushed the pie away and told Jenkins he was full. Then he went to the guest room to sleep. He tossed and turned all night and couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the woman from his dream. He could almost feel her touch, but then he would wake up. Just before sunrise, he got up and went downstairs to try to make some coffee. "Can't sleep?" Jenkins asked, sitting at the kitchen table. "I can't," George admitted. "Why did my parents give me up? Who were they? Where are they now? Why don't I have any memories with them? What kind of life did they live?" Jenkins looked down at his hands. "Dead men don't talk," he mumbled. George grabbed his grandfather by the shoulders. "Please, Grandpa, I need to know." Jenkins shook him off roughly and stood up. "Get your things. We're leaving," he said. "What? Where are we going?" George asked. "We're driving to California," Jenkins said. "California," George repeated. He knew that his parents lived there, but he had no idea that Jenkins did too. He quickly packed his things and they left the house. After they were both in the car, George asked, "Are you sure this is the best idea? You didn't even tell me that you lived here too." "I didn't think you deserved to know," Jenkins said. "You weren't ready." "Well, I am now," George insisted. "And I want to know everything about my parents." Jenkins stayed silent for a few moments while he drove. "They died a long time ago," he finally said. "What?" George shouted. "You said dead men don't talk. That means they're still alive, right?" "No, George, they're dead. I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner, but I thought you weren't ready." George felt tears prickling at his eyes. "How did they die? Where are they buried?" Jenkins hesitated. "They died in a car accident. I buried them myself. I'm sorry, George." George sank to the floor, sobbing. Everything he had hoped for, everything he had dreamed of, it was all gone. His parents were dead. They hadn't just given him up. They had died. Trying to imagine what his life would have been like if they had lived, he wondered what it must have been like to grow up with them. How old would he have been now? What would they have taught him? Would he have become a better person? Jenkins put a hand on George's shoulder. "Come on, let's go see them," he said. George sniffed and nodded. He wiped the tears off his face and got into the car. The drive to the cemetery was filled with uncomfortable silences. George looked at the houses and trees rushing past and tried to imagine what his parents looked like. Did they look like him? Were they tall? Were they short? Did they have blue eyes like him or brown eyes like Jim? He wondered what they sounded like when they talked. Did they laugh a lot? Did they get angry? Did they ever argue? When they arrived at the cemetery, Jenkins pointed to two graves under a large oak tree. One was for a man named John Smith, born December 9th, died February 9th. "I never got to know you," he whispered, "but I wish I had. I wish I had known you my whole life." He could feel Jenkins watching him, but he didn't care. He talked to the dead man and the dead woman, telling them everything about his life. Everything he had accomplished, everything he had learned. He told them about his dreams and the strange feeling he had that they were trying to reach out to him. "I think I'm ready to let you go now," he whispered at the end. "I hope you found peace a long time ago. If you're watching over me, I'm glad it's over now. I love you, Mom and Dad. Goodbye." George felt a warmth spread through him as he spoke. He stood up and brushed the dirt off his jeans. He looked at his grandfather, who was crying. "I'm sorry I kept secrets from you for so long," Jenkins said. "I was afraid you wouldn't understand." "I understand now," George said. "Thank you for taking care of me. Thank you for raising me. I'm a better person because of it. Thank you for loving me." Jenkins nodded, wiping the tears from his eyes. He took George back home, and then he returned to California to live out the remainder of his days. Every year on the anniversary of their death, George visits John and Maria's grave and talks to them about his life. Now he knows that they're watching over him and he feels their love every day.